Not long ago, my niece Jennifer was visiting, and I offered her an opportunity to choose a radio from my collection, and she chose this Zenith. So I plugged it in to see if it worked, and it sort of worked, but it didn't work well, so I told her I would repair it and ship it on to her later. It turns out that this radio had two very significant problems, both of which were difficult for me to assess initially, but the oscillator coil was damaged. I managed to repair that by finding where the damage was and getting a wire soldered onto the magnet wire that creates the coil. And the push button assembly was at some point taken apart by someone who had no idea what they were doing. They rewired it completely. I don't think there was one correct wire that they put together. The wire that was on the original coils on the push-button assembly had cotton insulation on it, and some of the places where he rewired it, he wound cotton-covered wires around the terminal and tried to solder them, and as you can imagine, that didn't work too well. But he did recap the set, and that all appears just fine. So all I had to do is figure out how to rewire the push-button area, the push-button assembly, which is easily removed from the radio. And in the next photograph, you can see that it is out of the radio. But it was probably the most tedious and difficult project I've ever tackled. Once I determined the oscillator coil was defective, it was not that difficult to repair. There was a broken wire that someone else had once again tried to solder, and they had done a very poor job of soldering it. The radio did initially work, but I think I had bumped it at some point and caused it to lose continuity, so it was easy to repair once it was figured out. I did remove the coil because the repair job was on the bottom side and put it back in, so this was not that difficult. So on to the repair of the push-button assembly. I've had numerous broken wires on here, and here's one where I have made a splice. It's one where I did wrap some number 30 gauge around some of the existing 34 gauge, and I was able to make a successful splice. Some of the other places, this has been almost impossible to do because the wires are so short. Here you can see where I've made a lap splice. It was such a short piece of wire, that's all that there was right here. I was not able to wrap that around it. I just don't have the dexterity to do it. The piece of wire I'm dealing with here is less than a half an inch long. But one of my friends told me that what he had done is just laid two wires side by side and soldered them together. So I scraped off the enamel insulation. And I also do stained glass work, and I've got some liquid rosin that they use for soldering lead came in stained glass, and I dipped both wires in there and then tinned the wires before I soldered them together, and they soldered together quite nicely. Fortunately, I'm able to remove the entire push-button assembly from the radio and work at it outside of the radio. I've been clamping it in my vise in various positions to hold it steady while I work on it, and that's what I'm doing right now, getting ready to solder another connection on one of the push-button assembly terminals. Prior to soldering, I test each terminal or each end of each piece of wire with my ohm meter to make sure that I have continuity. Although you can't see it, I'm wearing one of those magnifier headpieces. And I've got some of that rosin on here that I'm putting on. Hopefully we have a good joint there. I don't hear it. Ah, my meter shut off. Looks good. Getting ready to splice another wire. I've got it scraped clean, and I've got a little of this flux on the end of my screwdriver tip here. I'm going to tin this prior to trying to solder them together. And I've been testing just along the length of the wire, that just to see if I can make sure that it's got continuity, and it does. Don't know how well that shows up with the camera, but it's the second time I've done that, and it seemed to work pretty good. I'm not going to pull on it very hard. Trying to scrape all sides of the wire, and just to make sure the wire's clean enough. And it is not. Okay, we are clean enough. More flux. I'm putting a very small amount of solder on here because I've got a bunch more to go. One more test, and that will be from here. We do not have continuity, and I think that is because I have not done anything to this other one. There's a wire right here. Shoot. That's one of the wires that has cotton insulation still wrapped around it that a previous restorer had done, so I'm going to have to undo that one. Got some solder sucker here. Just about got all of it. Okay, we got it free. They're cleaned up. You can see the copper, the piece of the old cotton just came off of it. I find it incredible that somebody was so inattentive as to what they were doing that they could leave cotton insulation wrapped around a wire they were trying to solder. Okay. I can barely see this wire. Okay. Put a little flux on it. I'm not sure if all these steps I'm taking are necessary, but it is such a pain in the butt to do anything here that I want to make sure I don't have any problems if I can avoid them. I hope this wire shows up in the video. Success. Well, I haven't filmed everything I've done because you've seen what I've been doing, but right now I am 95% done. There are 5 push buttons. Each push button has 2 coils, and each coil has 2 wires. So there are 20 points of connection I need to make. I now have 19 of them done successfully. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make number 20. Right here at the tip, you can see a piece of bare wire sticking out, approximately 1 millimeter long. That's all I have left to make a connection to this one. And quite frankly, I'm not 100% sure that that's what I'm looking for, but that's all I can find. So that is what I'm going to attempt to do. I've cleaned it a little bit on the top. I'm going to try to make a solder joint there. I don't know what's going to happen. Okay, I was able to confirm I do get continuity here. I teased it just a little bit with a pair of pliers and I got it to come out maybe twice as long. Maybe I got 1.5 millimeters, but there's the wire right there at the tip. So I'm going to make another loop, see if I can get that soldered. So this is what I've been doing. I've been cleaning the ends of the wire. I've been trying to tin them just to make sure I can solder them a little easier, and now I'm going to make a coil. You can see where I've taken a resistor and I've wrapped the number 30 wire around the end of it. I'm going to take that off and it's going to become a coil. and I will put this over the tiny wire and solder that. I've got a little bit of flux on the end of my screwdriver. I'm going to put that on that little tiny wire. See if I can tin it. Okay, I got that down over it. Just tried to lift it back off when I pulled the soldering iron out. Okay. Check it for continuity. And I do have continuity. Holy smokes. So here's that wire, and it goes right here. I got continuity. 20 out of 20. I hope I never do this again in my whole life.